Welcome to the Wounded Leadership Podcast, Stories from the Wounded. I'm your host, Dr. Matthew Tanner, the founder of Wounded Leadership Ministries. You know, the calling to shepherd God's church brings some of life's greatest joys and adventures. Yet this calling also comes with profound challenges. Many church leaders face those challenges in silence. Nearly every pastor will experience the pain of unjustified termination or forced resignation at least once in their ministry journey. On this podcast, we create a safe place where wounded leaders can share their stories, find community, and discover pathways toward healing and a renewed purpose. Each episode will bring honest conversations with those who have walked through the valley of ministerial suffering and emerged stronger on the other side. Whether you're currently serving in ministry, recovering from church trauma yourself, or simply want to better understand the challenges that are facing today's church leaders, this podcast is for you. It will offer biblical wisdom, practical strategies, and genuine hope. Now let's begin today's conversation. Welcome to the Wounded Leadership Podcast, Stories from the Wounded. I am super excited today to have Brian Lee from Broken to Beloved. And we met in LA, of all places, on the Common Table Network. So like we've done with our previous episodes, Brian, we're going to jump right in. I'm going to let you introduce yourself, tell us who you are, what you do, and then we'll dive into your story.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm Brian. I am an ordained minister, have been pastoring for over 20 something years, which never sounds right. Primarily in worship contexts, but also a lot of executive teams and that kind of stuff, planning. I'd like to think that I have a very logistics and systems mind that just likes to know how things work and how to make them work better.
Yeah.
I'm an Enneagram 1, so it's that hard reformer perfectionist side of me. It's always like, yeah, we could tweak that a little bit.
That can be better.
And it has also gotten me in a lot of trouble, right? So it's not knowing the shadow side of that really showed up in my life very often.
Gotcha.
And very often in ministry, both with leaders and with volunteers and teams, where all they experience from me is the very judgmental, perfectionistic, condemning side of, oh, that was wrong. Or everything was great except for those two things, and that's all I'm going to hyperfixate on. Right?
Right.
So,
right.
And it's the result of me doing that to myself first, and then it just kind of all bleeds out sideways.
Yeah.
And so in the however many years that I've been in churches, 3 of those places were extremely toxic to the point of what I would call spiritual abuse, right? The weaponizing of scripture or spiritual language to dehumanize or demean or other or shame or condemn, rather than to offer gospel hope and life and freedom. And so it was a long road. It was over the course of many, many years. 2 of those experiences were back to back, which just caused all kinds of identity and calling questions for me of the problem is obviously me because this keeps happening. And then by the 3rd time it happened, I had already been introducing myself in interviews as damaged goods. So by this time, I'm just convinced I'm broken. There's nothing. What else can I do at this point? What is the point? And it was through lots of really, really good counseling with my counselor that I was seeing at the time, who gave me the language for spiritual abuse. And as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh, that makes so much more sense. And let me just go find everything I can on the topic and immerse myself in the books and the resources that I could find just to get some language around what happened to me. Because until then, you just think you're crazy. You think you're the one who did everything. Absolutely, there are things that I did. I played a role in all of in the contexts and environments that I was in. And not all of it was my fault. And there were certainly things that happened to me by these other leaders or pastors. And so being able to learn how to untangle those pieces and separate my role from their role, to accept responsibility for what I've done versus to recognize and integrate the things that were happening to me, and then to move away from this identity of brokenness, to say, okay, this is something that happened to me, but it doesn't have to be who I am, and to reclaim the language and identity of belovedness instead. And so it all started with doing that work in counseling, and then eventually with other people that I invited to kind of walk through that process together, that the nonprofit Broken to Beloved was born. So we've officially been around for 2 years in October, which feels wild and not real, but is also definitely true. And
Right.
we're certainly figuring things out as we go. And every time I say we, it's the royal we, because it's really just me and a
Right.
small board, right, of directors who we meet occasionally to talk about what we need to talk about. But
Yeah.
in terms of the programs and the work and the whatever else, it's really me trying to figure it out.
Yeah, right there with you.
Mm-hmm.
Right on. Yeah, there's no book on this. There's no how to step by step. You highlighted on a few key things that I experience myself and I hear time and time again. The questioning, the calling,
Mm-hmm.
the stacked, what I call stacked damage.
Mm-hmm.
When it happens again and again. Then you begin to sell yourself as, well, I am damaged goods, and so you begin to
Mm-hmm.
set yourself up. So, if you can take me back to the beginning, because I know you didn't go into ministry that way. So, yeah, tell us some of the story, like the if you could walk us, you said it happened back to back. If you could walk us through some of those.
Yeah. I mean, when we talk about going back to the beginning in terms of ministry, unofficially, I've been in ministry since fourth grade, since my dad went and planted a church out in the suburbs of Pittsburgh. And when your
Gotcha.
dad is the church planter, you're the whole
You're in
family's
ministry.
recruited, right? You're in.
Yeah,
And so I was there playing the piano most Sundays until we found some other adults who were able and willing to gratefully relieve me. I was helping teach the Sunday school classes to my peers and to the kids younger than me. I think maybe even sometimes the kids older than me, because who else is there? And I don't claim that any of it was great by any means. It's just the life
that's what you had,
when you're a pastor's kid planting a church.
for
And
sure.
so it was a world I was very familiar with. I eventually left home to go to school, went to art college to not do music or any of those things. Senior year, I kind of had a crisis of everything,
Mhm.
and eventually found myself working in a church in South Philadelphia as their music minister. And they were 5 of like the best years of my life, honestly.
Wow.
Just the church took me in and adopted me in a way that they just absolutely did not need to. But it was just the culture of the place. A whole bunch of Italian families, and just it's everything, everyone's family.
Yeah.
And when they say it, they mean it. So most nights were not spent alone at home by myself. They were at someone else's house, eating dinner
Wow.
with their family, just hanging out, watching a show, whatever it was. And after about 5 years of doing that, felt like, I think this is what I'm supposed to do with my life. I should probably go learn it somewhere so I'm not making everything up as I go. And so I went back to school to get a second bachelor's, this time in church music. So I got
Gotcha.
some formal training in music theory, in administration and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Formal training in Bible and theology, because growing up in church and growing up as a pastor's kid does not teach you what you need to know about the Bible or
That
preparing
doesn't
for
give you a
services.
theology degree? What are you talking about?
Some
So
people would say it does, but
right.
I would say a different kind of theology. And graduating there, ended up getting a job at the school for a couple of years. My life has always flip-flopped between art and music. And so I studied art in college, went and worked in music at this church, went back to school to study music, graduated, and started working as their graphic designer, and was
Wow.
there for a couple of years doing that. And slowly discovered that the culture of being on staff was vastly different from that of being a student. And behind the scenes, it was extremely toxic.
Was this a Christian or
It was
Christian
a Christian college,
institution?
yes, Christian college, Christian university, and the people who you saw publicly were very different privately behind closed doors or in other meetings. And so it was dealing with the cognitive dissonance of like, hold on, you are not the person I thought you were. And you're the person who has been teaching me what it meant to model Christ and humility and servant leadership and all of these things. And yet what I'm experiencing is absolutely authoritarian leadership
Wow.
of it's my way or the highway, and this is the way you have to do it, up to and including lying about things to make things look better.
Wow.
And it's like, well, why would we talk for 4 years about integrity and now you're telling me to do this, right? So
And
it's
you're
like, it doesn't make any sense.
mm,
And so it just got really bad. Let's just leave it at that. I mean, really awful meetings, really awful one-on-ones. I mean, people constantly getting shuffled around or fired just for whatever reasons you want to say. I remember being called into one of the top meetings and just the president leaning across the desk and just looking at me saying, maybe you're just not a nice person.
wow.
And what do you do with that, right? And this is the person who you looked up to for so long and everyone else knows as just so kind and generous and all of these things. And now they're just staring at you across a desk and saying, maybe you're just not a nice person because this is the way you're going to act. So eventually we found our way out of there.
Yeah.
And my wife and I found our way. I got a position at a church in New Jersey, large, very multi-ethnic and diverse. I think we had over 80 countries represented. They had an amazing music and creative arts program.
Mm.
And so I was really looking forward to it. It was with fellow people that we went to school with. And we're like, this is great. Let's catch our breath. Let's have friends again, not be like scared about going to work every single day and dreading going to the office. And for a few years, it was wonderful.
Yeah.
But this church had a reputation for being board led and pastor led, and that pendulum would just swing further and further every time.
Back and forth between the two?
Back and forth between the two, yeah, depending on who happened to be in charge at that moment or in that
Wow.
season.
So there's a constant struggle of
A
leadership.
constant struggle and tension was the reputation. And it's nice to, if you're familiar with the concept of betrayal blindness, right? Dr. Jennifer Freed. And this idea is like, well, I can't see it because this is my livelihood. So to me, everything looks great. Everything's running just fine. And I was never part of board meetings. So I was like, and I didn't really want to know what was happening. I just want to do my job. It took about 3 or 4 years, but things were just kind of falling apart at the seams again, behind the scenes, where the pastor was young. He had just been voted in. And I think the board just thought, hey, we can just mold this guy and have him do whatever we want. And slowly people were being pushed out. Talk about forcible terminations and just all this kind of stuff where I don't think he was able to fire anyone. I don't think it was in his nature or in his ability. And if I'm being completely honest, I think it was just kind of like a cowardly thing, right? My relationships are too important and I can't be seen as the bad guy, so I'm not going to fire you. Mm-hmm. What I will do is work you to the bone until you decide to quit on your own.
So it's a form of the mobbing.
It is.
That takes place. Is like,
it
I'm
is.
not going to come out and fire you.
I'll either just keep changing your position until you get tired of it, or I'll just throw so much work on you, you can't handle it and you burn out and quit yourself. So I'm not the one who did it.
Throw enough weight on the bridge where you just...
That's it. And so I saw it happen to a lot of people within the staff. And then eventually it was my turn. And they offered us a different job than the one that we had that I really wasn't qualified for at all, without being told why I wasn't allowed to keep my current position. There were no reasons given, none of that kind of stuff. And it was offered they assumed I would take it because they thought we would need the job and needed the insurance. And I turned it down, took the 3-month severance, turned it into 6 while we looked for something else. And that was it was a dark time, right? It's just like, so this is where it's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do anymore. This is my first job after graduating, going back to school in ministry. And this was the experience. What do I do with this?
And so vastly different from the first experience you had.
Exactly. And so that 6 months was a whole lot of soul searching and wondering and asking questions while also still trying to find a job, because I knew this severance was going to last forever. We were about to have our first baby and all of these things, and eventually found another job at another church within a different denomination. And it was great. It was wonderful. I think it was what we needed in that season to just have a breath of something completely different. And so for about 2 years, felt like I was actually maybe finally thriving in ministry and being allowed to do what I'm allowed to do. And I remember sitting in one-on-ones with the pastor, asking all these questions about how he preferred for things to go. And he would stop me and say, Brian, stop asking me all these questions. This is why I hired you. Just make the decisions.
Yeah,
I trust you to do your job.
And he almost didn't know how to handle that.
I absolutely. And I told him that. I said, I've never heard someone say that to me before. I don't know what to do with that.
Wow.
And he would just say, I'm sorry. And this is why we hired you. So I trust you to do your job. Just go do it. You're doing great. And I was like, I've never heard those words before.
Yeah, well, this is after two toxic
this is after
areas.
2 back-to-back experiences of really horrible things. And then about 2 years later, tragically, one of our friends, good friends, passed away, and we were involved in helping plan her funeral and all of these things. I got in touch with a pastor of the church that she had last been at, and through a very long story made much, much shorter, it was a giant manipulation to get us to move down to this church and take a job there.
Wow.
Which I did, sort of eyes wide open. And again, coming in, knowing and sharing how much we are grieving, moving to this church that we know that our friend will never be at again, and also bringing all the baggage of these other 2 experiences and just saying, I'm damaged goods. You probably don't want me. And they're like, and the promise was, well, we are a church that's known as a healing church. So we would love for you to come and heal. and get your feet under you and all of these things. And we thought, gosh, doesn't that sound nice? What
It
if?
does. On the
What if?
surface, it sounds great.
Um, and it ended up being the most toxic, most abusive environment I'd ever been in. So it was, I think, only about 3 years before I left there, half or more of which was spent trying to figure out how to get out sooner. I mean, blackout
Just the
panic attacks, major
wow.
anxiety. This is where we started going to counseling and therapy and just kind of saying, help me to figure this out because I've already done this twice and now I feel like I'm doing it again, except it's worse. What's wrong with me? All of this stuff. And I mean, I could tell you stories, but you've heard them, right? It's the kind of stuff that turns your hair white and stand on edge of just like, I don't understand how ordained ministers and people who are trained or called to lead and help people can treat
Mhm.
other people this way or speak to them in that manner. And in my experience, it's always the desire to hold on to some form of power and control. And something threatens that, and so they lash out. And so that's been the experience 3 different times. So I left that position in June or July of 2021, and I've been out since. I had about a year or two still going to counseling, finding other, just doing other contract work and that kind of stuff. And then the end of 2022 is when I first launched a cohort to walk other people through this process of what does it look like to move from broken to that identity of beloved.
Right.
And we had a good enough response that I just kept running it. We started doing an online summit to answer the question, okay, I have language, I validate my story, but I don't know what to do now. So
Yeah.
how do we answer the question, now what? And from there got a really, really surprising response. So that's where I decided to make it official. We started a nonprofit in October of 2023. And so here we are.
Wow. How hard was it for you to not find that identity in the toxic? I mean, because we tend to forget the good experiences and we identify ourselves from those toxic things.
Hmm.
And you said something earlier, like you had your flaws, but none of them should have been fatal flaws. But yet we
Mm,
define ourselves according to those. How did you work through that?
we do. That's a lovely question. I don't think I've been asked that one before, Matthew.
That's I try to throw out the good questions there.
Well, I mean, we were talking a little bit about it earlier with the Enneagram, and I love it. And it's not everything, but it is really good. And so a lot of the work I was doing at the time was as an Enneagram coach. I had my own coaching business. I was working with another company that specializes in the Enneagram. And one of the core messages, if you approach it from a gospel-centered point of view, which I do, and the Enneagram is neutral, it does anyone can use it, regardless of your
Yeah.
faith or your beliefs, is this idea that you will often identify your type by the worst parts of you.
Hmm.
And that's not the truth of who you are. It's what shows up because of the survival strategies that you've put in place. So for me, the fixing, reforming, perfecting, all of those things. But at the truth and at the core of it is this identity that says, no, no, God created you and called you very good
Hmm.
before you did any of those things. And if Romans 8 is true and that nothing can separate me from the love of God, then nothing that I do and mess up or anything that I don't do can change that identity, right? Can change that core part of it. And it's true for all 9 types that we all carry this message with us of I'm broken, I'm damaged, I'm defective, I'm deficient, I'm not good enough, I'm not loved enough, I'm not doing enough, whatever that is. And underneath all of that is there is a God who says, but yes, you are. And no matter what happens, that doesn't change in my eyes. And so I think it was a real saving grace that I was doing such intense work in that area of my life to not over identify with all the horrible, rotten things that I know to be true about me, but to try to fix my eyes on the truth of the gospel and of a hope of a God who still loves me in the middle of all of those things, who, yes, allows all of these awful and toxic things to happen, but doesn't necessarily intend for them to, and certainly doesn't want them to be my identity. They're things that happened to me. They are not who I am. And so I think that had a lot to do with it, is just the inner work I think I was trying to do about my own identity and personality and moving away from all these perfectionistic tendencies of mine to move toward, what is often called the virtue of serenity. It's like, can I move towards just accepting things the way they are and seeing what I would consider imperfections in nature and in beauty and things and recognizing them as beautiful and as intended? And I think that had a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I think that's why, according to the study that I've done, 60 to 70% of pastors or church leaders who go through this never go back into ministry
Mm-hmm.
because they never reconcile that struggle you just talked about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where this question came from, but I'm going to just throw it out there. You talked about the difference between the great experience and then the very toxic ones, and that changing your identity. What about the identity of the church? How long did it take you to love the church again?
That's another really great question, and maybe a weird one for me, because
Okay.
I this is in no way tooting my horn, because I think in a lot of ways this has also been a detriment to me. I think I just have this odd gift of faith and of hope. And I am the last person to call myself an optimist, because I am in no way an optimist. But when it comes to the Big C church,
Hmm.
it is something I have always believed in and always had hope in as the unblemished, beautiful bride of Christ that I know someday will come, even though not here and not yet. And for all of the things that have happened to me and all of the rottenness and toxicity that I've seen within the church little c, I also know that it's made up of me and you and the rest of us who are all just as damaged and all just as broken and all just as not perfect, and that it's not the way it's supposed to be. And I think I say that often. It's just like, this is not the way it's supposed to be. And for some unexplainable reason, I choose to cling to that hope and that faith that someday things will be set right, and that there are still people who are working towards a redemption of those things, and people who do still want to name and shine a light on those dark areas to
Hmm.
say, hey, we are not meant to be this way. We can do better. We can do
Yeah.
different. And I don't know how else to answer the question except for that. It's just, it is not really explainable. It doesn't really make sense. I shouldn't think that after all the things that I've seen and heard from other people, but I do. And I also totally understand when people don't. Like, I totally, like what you're saying, like the 60 to 70% of pastors who never return. It's like, I totally get it. And I quote Mark Twain all the time when it comes to that. It's a cat that sits on a hot stove lid won't ever sit on a hot stove lid again, but it probably won't sit on a cold stove lid either.
Wow.
And that quote just makes sense to me.
It
And
does.
it just gives me so much compassion for those people who have made those decisions in either way to say, I get it.
Yeah, and I think it's given them permission to make that decision as they need to. How do you determine success and healing? Because we try to make it
Mm,
success has to be getting back into
hmm.
church.
Hmm.
And I love that quote. By the way, I'm at the home place of Mark Twain here, so we hear a lot of that around here.
I love it.
But determining, success, because those that are wounded, they get this mentality that success only means going back into a
Hmm.
vocational ministry. So for you, what was success, and how would you help others? Because hopefully this podcast, people are listening to it because they've been wounded. How do they change that mentality of what success is?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if any of us can define success. And to a degree, I don't know that any of us can really define healing either. And
That's interesting.
I say that just having finished the book by Hadley Vlahos, I think her name is, called The In Between. She's a hospice nurse.
Okay.
And so the book is just chapter after chapter of all these different clients that she's had who she's walked with as they all prepare to die. And they are some of the most redemptive, most healing stories. I was in tears at the end of most of those chapters of what everyone else would consider to be the ultimate failure is to just let someone die. And yet to watch her and these families and these people walk with grace to the end, to the literal end, and just accept what is coming or fight what is coming or be afraid of what is coming. Everyone handles it differently. And in the end, we all end the same way. And what does that look like? Right. And I say that recognizing that people who suffer abuse and trauma are often pushed, especially in spiritual settings, pushed to heal too quickly. Oh, you're not healed yet? Oh, you're not over that yet? Oh, you're still talking about that? And the very nature of trauma is that it embeds itself in our body because there was a lack of some empathetic witness for us to say, I see you, I hear you. I believe you. I'm so sorry that happened. And until we find someone who can do that for us, that trauma will reside in our bodies.
Wow.
So that's one part of it, right? So
Yeah.
the healing from the traumatic aspect of it, and it can be little t trauma, big t trauma, doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
We all respond to trauma differently based on who is around us and how we feel seen and feel felt and feel known. I would throw out the hypothetical question for people. It's like, when you look at the life of Jesus, was he healed? Because why did he come back at the resurrection with scars? Because
Mm-hmm.
most of us would consider gaping holes in your hands and feet to not really be healed and restored.
Wow.
And yet, and even at the end, if we are to believe the book of Revelation and the second return of Christ, still with holes. Well, what is that? I thought you're supposed to have this new glorious body. And so, what if our wounds actually speak something as a witness to other people of what has happened to us, and they're not meant to be filled back in? And they're not meant to go back to the way things were, but they are meant to be worn as permanent reminders, not just to us, but to the people around us of, look at what happened to me and look at where I am today and how things are different.
Wow.
So healing is such a tricky word because it means different things to different people. So I often like to challenge what that means for you,
Mm-hmm.
because once abuse happens and once trauma happens, there is no going back.
Right.
And that can be okay, right? You plant an acorn in the ground, it's never going to go back to being an acorn. If it does what it's meant to do, it's going to be this giant oak tree.
Right. But that's what we have been taught as
For so long.
ministers, pastors, that you have to go back to being an acorn. I mean, that's the only thing that healing looks like. And, as a pastor's kid group myself, that you always get these conventional wisdom things, which I don't really like conventional wisdom because most time it's wrong. Don't have friends in church. Don't be vulnerable around the church people.
Yeah.
Hide your scars, all of those things, because don't show weakness and all of those things. We're teaching the wrong thing. I'm trying not to get on a soapbox here, but how do you do that? Because we're kind of, all this is weaving together, that you're told in order to not to survive and go back into ministry or even just life, you can't be vulnerable. You don't show weakness. How do you carefully do that? How did you do that? How do we carefully do that and just be authentic? You know what? I am wounded. I have scars, but they've made me who I am, and that's okay. How do we navigate that? How do we change
Carefully.
that culture?
Well, I don't know about changing culture, but it's got to start with you if you want anything to change in the culture. Because if I'm unwilling to change anything about the way I do it, how could I possibly expect anyone else to? Right? So I think it has to start there. And so asking those curious and compassionate questions. We run cohorts seasonally, and we're just opening one now. And one of the first things we do is to help people to navigate their own story. Because so many times in these contexts, we are robbed of our own story, because I'm called up to the platform on my very last Sunday, and the pastor puts his hand on my back, usually with a knife attached, and said, "Hey, can we all give it up for Pastor Brian and just his years of faithfulness and the service that he's done for all of us, and just say thank you. And God's calling him into his next season, and we just want to honor him and give him space to process as they prepare for their new season of ministry." When the truth is, you stabbed me in the back and you're doing it
Yeah.
right now. I don't have anything in this next season because you're pushing me out and not giving me other options. And you're telling people to not get in touch with me because you're afraid I'm going to tell them the truth. So you're going to isolate me from this community that I have spent years pouring into and building.
Wow.
And so now I will be left alone. And no one will reach out because they're too afraid to, because either they don't want to know the truth or they've been told not to ask it.
Yeah.
And now we are sent out like this. So one of the first things that we do is to meet with the survivors and just say, "Hey, have you ever told your own story in your own words? Would you like to?
Mm-hmm.
Can we help you reclaim agency for yourself?" And then just look you in the eyes and say, "I hear you, I believe you, and I'm sorry that happened. That was wrong."
Yeah.
It has to start there.
Absolutely, and that's why this podcast exists, because letting people authentically tell their story,
Mhm.
um, and we want that to continue to happen. So for you, man, I've got so many things swimming in my brain of where to go to. I'm gonna have to listen back to this, and I'm gonna be writing down a bunch more questions, and we're gonna have you back on.
We'll do a follow-up.
Yeah, we're gonna have to. I'm already thinking of some follow-up things. Yeah. What do you tell that that wounded person when they are isolated and are isolated from the event and also isolate themselves?
Mhm.
They think their story doesn't matter. How do you get how do you call them out to say, "Don't be afraid of your story, own it, understand it. It's okay to tell it." How do you crack that egg? Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, and I think I would say again very carefully. And I would massage the language a little bit, and I know it's mostly just semantics, but even just changing the posture of that phrase, how do you call them out? And I would
Okay,
say let's call them in.
I'll accept that.
Because
Yeah,
calling out has this connotation of like I'm going to confront you about something.
yeah, well
And
said.
calling in has this connotation of I want to invite you and I want to welcome you into this space. And it
Yeah,
communicates safety.
well said.
And I think that's one of the first pieces. There's a quote that I've been quoting, but I can't remember the person's name and I can't find it anywhere online again. But I
Yeah,
think they're a developmental psychologist that says, all humans are asking two questions. Am I safe and am I loved? And if I
wow.
can't answer the first question, yes, the second question doesn't even matter. And so, especially when I've experienced abuse or trauma, the number one question is, do I feel safe right now?
Mhm.
And if I can't answer yes, nothing else matters. And so when we call people and invite them to tell their stories, we have to allow them to feel safe. And there is no way to do that except with our presence
Yeah.
and by trying to communicate the ways that we want to help make them feel safe.
Mm.
Use narcissism, love bombing, all of these things communicate to someone, hey, trust me, I'm here for you. And then it gets twisted very quickly, right?
Right.
And so when we've experienced that and when we're used to that, it makes sense to be suspicious. It makes sense to be cautious. It makes sense to hold back. It's like, well, I don't know. Let me keep my distance right now. So having language around, hey, I know you don't know me, but if and when you feel like you'd like to share some of your story, I would love to hear it.
And
And
listen to that story without commentary
that's
at
it.
first. Yeah, just
That's it.
listen,
It
you
is
know?
just listening and it is listening to listen, not listening to respond. Right.
Kinda like I say before, sorry to interrupt, but I say before, like Job's friends, don't be Job's
Hmm.
friends.
Yeah.
Don't give advice. Job just needed somebody to sit in the ashes with him and just listen.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's it, I think. And it's why I tell people in the cohort the very first time, it's like, listen, when you tell your story, these are going to be my responses. I'm sorry. I hear you. I believe you. That was wrong. It shouldn't have happened. Right. And
Yeah,
we're not going to try to fix your problem because guess what? It already happened. We can't go back.
yeah.
I can offer you a space to share where you are now.
Mhm.
I can offer you a space to tell the story that wasn't allowed to be told before. And so by building those slow relationships, we allow that safety to be built. We allow trust to be earned rather than demanded. We allow, and another big thing I think is mutual vulnerability. And it's not saying that it's tit for tat, but it's like if someone is going to choose to be that vulnerable with me, do I have something to offer in return? Because I know in relationships I've had in the past, people have often demanded vulnerability of me, but never offered something in return. I was like, you're holding all the ammo, dude. Like this isn't
Yeah.
fair. This isn't right.
Which talk
It
about
doesn't
not
feel
feeling
safe.
safe. Yeah,
That's
there's no way you
exactly
feel
right.
safe in that.
That's exactly right. So I think just knowing how to do that again in a safe way, like sharing things that are appropriate. We don't need to overshare either, but something that communicates this is a two-way relationship. And if you're going to be vulnerable, I will also choose to be vulnerable with you. And so it's that invitational welcoming process that isn't going to make demands of someone. I think that helps to set up that environment.
That's the community I think all of us in this space are trying to create. I remember distinctly, and I too have been through uh, this phenomenon several times, and all these things identify. And of the 20-ish years of pastoring and being through all of these things, one time, only one time in 20 something years, I had one person come back and say, "I'm sorry."
Mm. Hmm.
And I distinctly remember that. And like, how is it? What are some of the reactions you get from those guys, the ministry leaders, guys that have been through it, when they just, yeah, I mean, and I know you're not the one that hurt them, but somebody said, "I'm sorry that happened." What kind of reactions do you see from that? How healing is that?
I mean, it's visceral oftentimes. And I will often hear, I've never heard someone say that to me before. Like you're saying, I've never
Yeah,
heard that before. Or when we allow other people to respond to their story and express anger on their behalf, or grief or frustration or whatever it is,
yeah.
several times. We've led over 110 people, I think, now through our cohorts. And I can't
Wow.
count how many times I've never heard someone be mad for me before. I've never had someone be mad about that. I thought I was just crazy, or I thought I wasn't allowed to be mad or supposed to be mad or any of those things. And as I hear you say that, it just makes so much sense. And
Wow.
there's this release of all of these things that they've been carrying for so long. Or to say, I've never had someone apologize for what happened to me. I've never had someone say that it was anything other than what was supposed to happen, or
That's
that it was my fault, or whatever it is.
such a massive first step in healing.
Mm-hmm.
Just, well, healing can't be built until that happens first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brian, man, gosh, I've got so many questions we're going to have you back soon on a follow up on this. This is I can't wait to post this episode. As you're listening to yourself and these questions and kind of let's wrap it all up into your closing thoughts, for all those that are listening to this podcast.
One of the things that we try really hard to do, one of our stated values, our first stated value is agency over prescription. Because, like we said at the beginning, so often when we experience abuse, our agency has been stripped from us. Choices are made on our behalf, not really on our behalf, on their behalf, but for
To
us,
us, yeah.
for us to us. And so we want to actively avoid prescribing or telling you what you should do
Yeah,
or
or
what you
telling them
need to
what their
do.
journey should look like.
Exactly. Because it's going to be distinct and unique for everyone. And at the same time, that being said,
Yeah.
with all of the things that I have read and learned, I'm recognizing a pattern in terms of what it has looked like for me to heal and what I hear a lot of other people sharing with me. And so, what I've written about is this idea that we notice, name, and navigate.
Mhm.
And the very first thing you need to do to move towards healing, and the phrase that we use all the time is moving toward healing and wholeness, is to notice that something's wrong. Because if I can't even notice it, what am I going to do with it?
Right.
If it's just part of who I am, if I don't notice that my brokenness is my identity, how can I
Mhm.
hope to address it?
For sure.
It's just this unconscious thing. Once I've noticed, it's like something's off. Something doesn't
Yes,
feel right,
something needs to
right?
change here.
And Wade Mullen has that whole book, Something's Not Right, which is excellent. But it's once I've noticed that, now I look to give it a name, because I can't hope to heal or address something if I don't know what to call it. If I go to the doctor and say, hey, doc, my arm's hurting, and they just send me home with aspirin, but they never diagnose it, that's not going to help.
You
It's
don't know what
addressing symptoms, not the actual cause, right? So
exactly.
by giving something a name, it's like, oh, I've experienced spiritual abuse. I was gaslit the other day in that conversation. Oh, I'm experiencing anxiety because I'm seeing this person out in public who I was really hoping to not see, right? Whatever that name is that we choose to give things, just name it, and then you can know what to do with it. And then navigate is, again, going back to that sense of agency. It's like, now that I know what I'm dealing with, what do I want to do with this?
Yeah, that's good.
Do I want to address it? Do I want to skip it and just ignore it for now? Do I need to set it aside? Is now the time to do it? Do I want to bring someone with me? Do I want to do this by myself? But the point is that I get to choose and decide how I want to address it instead of someone telling me this is what I have to do.
Yeah.
And so there's a blog I have on the Logos site. I can give you the link if you want to share that. But it kind
Yeah,
of walks through
absolutely.
that process. And it's going to look different for everyone. But I think hitting those 3 stages, and this is not a one-time thing. It's like I do this over and over and over and over again with each of the things in my life. But being able to notice something's wrong, being able to figure it out and give that thing a name, and then choosing what do I want to do with this thing to navigate a step forward. I think those 3 things for me, if I just practice them over and over again, helps me move on that path toward healing and wholeness for me.
How important is it to have that sense of direction and not control, meaning the control that is only for the Lord, but having that choice and that control back in your navigation?
Yeah, agency is going to be huge. I would say having agency is huge. I would say having a sense of direction doesn't have to be. Often when I'm coaching, I talk about coaching and the Enneagram or the process or whatever it is like a GPS. And I've learned this language in other places, but it tells me where I am, where I want to go, and where I've been. And having that sense of direction isn't going to be hugely important because if I go off track, it's going to reroute me anyway. As long as the only time that GPS is not useful is when I'm not moving.
That's
right?
good.
If I'm just going to sit still, that map is doing nothing for me. I've got to pick any direction, and then it will start helping me out. It's like, all right, you're doing great. Just keep on going. You missed a turn. Let's reroute you, and we'll go this way instead. But as long as I'm moving, I'm okay. So as long as I'm taking a step forward, then I'm in good hands.
That is so good. Man, we're running out of time. Yeah, we're gonna have you back, Brian, and through this informal conversation, I'm gonna have you email me the links that you want when this podcast is posted, so that way I can make sure I get them right. But for the sake of the listeners right now, how do they find you? How do they find those links? Say it a couple of times so they can write it down. How do they get a hold of you, Brian?
The best place is probably just our website, is brokentobeloved.org. We have Instagram, we have a few other things, but in terms of all of the information in one place, the website's going to be the best. We've got a cohort that's coming up, launches in October. We open it again in February. We have an annual summit that we host virtually in January. We have an ongoing podcast as well. If you like to read, we have a book club that we run, and you can find all of those things at the website, brokentobeloved.org. Online, Instagram is just at brokentobeloved. And the number one thing, we're in fundraising mode. So if people are interested in the vision and wanting to support our mission, we would be more than happy. We're looking for $5,000 a month by the end of the year is the goal. So we're slowly working towards that. There's a button right on the website to donate and to support us. And that's pretty much where you can find me.
Brian, man, so many huge nuggets. This is going to be an episode that I think the listeners are going to want to listen to a couple of times. And I should have said this at the beginning. I may put a little caveat in the descriptor, is you're going to want to listen to this with a notebook and a pen, because you're going to want to write this down, some of these things, because they are so huge. So, Brian, thanks for being here. And if you would like more information, you can go to woundedleadership.com. It's going to have links to Wounded Leadership Ministries. We can get you linked up to some of those. But if you are wanting to tell your stories, you're listening to this, you're identifying with it, and you want to tell your story, there's a tab on our website, woundedleadership.com. Tell your story. Get a hold of us, because we want these stories to start a movement of healing and people to find a purpose and power in telling their story. Brian, thanks for having you, brother. We're going to have you back, and I look forward to visiting with you again soon, man.
Thanks, Matthew. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Wounded Leadership Podcast, Stories from the Wounded. We hope today's conversation has given you valuable insight into how vulnerability and resilience work to shape truly authentic leadership. Remember, our wounds don't define us. Every scar tells a story of survival, and every setback creates an opportunity for extraordinary growth. If today's episode resonated with you, please visit us at woundedleadership.com, where you're going to find resources, community forums, opportunities to share your own leadership journey. I also invite you to subscribe, rate, review this podcast on your favorite platform. Your support helps us to reach more leaders who might be struggling in silence. Till next time, this is Dr. Matthew Tanner reminding you that your wounds can become your greatest source of wisdom, connection, and strength. It's the Wounded Leadership Podcast, transforming wounds into wisdom, one story at a time.